What's going on, fam? Welcome to VEVE Investments. I appreciate you tuning in. On today's episode, we're going to be recapping the long-awaited Binance New Zealand interview with David Yu. So if you guys enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what you want to see in a future episode. Without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy. So this past week, we had a photo pop up with David and Dan at what looked like some sort of space facility, whether that was SpaceX or NASA. We know David is a big SpaceX fan. He has lots of photos on his Instagram. Now, I don't really think this is anything. If you look at the ceiling, it looks like it's almost a production setup. So I think it might have been David just kind of sharing his experience. He has kind of been open in the past, talking about how he is a fan of SpaceX and things like that. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed the nice little intro in light of that photo. Now, in the Binance interview with David Yu, they did discuss quite a bit. So today's episode is going to be covering 10 points. So with that being said, let's hop into the first one. Now, actually, before I do, I thought I'd highlight the Platinum Moment series that got announced this past week. So guys, we know the Golden Moments series came to a finale. The next one is now going to be the Platinum Moments, which I think if you looked at the moves that Disney was making, I think this was a series that we should have expected. We're going to be getting Mini Donald, first appearance Mini, and first appearance Dumbo. And on top of that, they are going to be dropping potions. If you happen to get one of the limited potions, you are going to be able to either keep it as a collectible itself, or you're able to open it up to redeem for one of the posters, and each poster matches one of the characters in the set. So personally, I actually really like what VEVE and Disney are doing here. I think it's quite a unique form of utility to introduce to start off. And I'd also be interested to see what you guys are thinking, so make sure to comment that down below. So one of the very first things that David starts to mention within this interview is, the inherent need for NFTs within the gaming industry. So he talks about Fortnite, he talks about Counter-Strike, and how these are examples of platforms where gamer assets have intrinsic value. So although you don't actually own the asset that is tied to your account, right? At the end of the day, those platforms can just take your account away or ban you. There is a very large business where people will create accounts, build those accounts up, and then sell them for a profit because people are interested in the character skins, the weapons, things like that. There are Counter-Strike weapon skins, right? Certain camos or like patterns you can get on your weapons that have gone for thousands of dollars. And this isn't actually anything new. I remember being back in high school and I knew of a couple people who would build Clash of the Clan accounts and Candy Crush accounts and sell them to other people around the school. So at this point in the interview, David and Ben are essentially talking about the need for NFTs in the gaming industry and how this has essentially always been around. It's just the technology hasn't been adopted. Now, one thing that I noticed a lot in this interview, and I noticed it more in this interview than I have in others, was David's awareness of just things like customer psychology. So there's actually several points throughout the interview where this happens, but a couple examples here. He talks about how collecting digital art has been around since the beginning. This started pretty much in the early stages. Once digital art became a thing, the collecting kind of followed right behind. He talks about how there's always been a fandom in the collectibles industry. He uses the tables for card trading games at the back of collectible stores as an example. He talks about how his and Dan's original goal was actually to create this fandom through VEVE. So he talks a lot in this interview about the importance of social proof, word of mouth, showing people your collectibles, getting people excited to hop on the app themselves and try it out. And that's quite important to me because what that tells me is that David is aware of different types of customer behaviors, market trends, and things like that. Another example would actually be he talked about different types of social trends. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, he listed them all. So I think little things like this are important to note, right? Because you have people in the community making comments about how David and Dan don't know what they're doing when it comes to marketing and they're doing it too slow or they're targeting the wrong people, instead of going for the mass markets, they should be going for the Web3 audience and so on and so forth. And, what I have to say to all that is it's very unlikely that any of the people making those comments have more experience than David or Al when it comes to stuff like this. And just going back to that third point again about how David and Dan wanted to create that fandom from the start, that is the reason why they've implemented things like AR and the Vault feature, because now you have people in the community who are creating things inside of these spaces and sharing it with people on platforms like Twitter that are only helping get other people on the platform. Now, building on the previous slide, David talks a lot about the importance of storytelling. So again, falling in line with some of the stuff we just talked about, like word of mouth, having stories to tell through your collectibles on this platform is another way of getting people involved, right? So David uses the example of mixing different toy soldiers as a kid. Well, you can do that with different brands on the VEVE app. Where else can you have a Rambo in a Lambo? Nowhere. What other platform has their fans or audience creating content like the VEVE 500? No one. So what David pretty much goes on to say is, by having this variety of IP, these brands offered on VEVE, what it provides is us users the ability to create more. Now we're only going to be on this slide for a few seconds here, but New Zealand stamps are coming to VEVE. So David does say that we can expect those this month. And stamps are a good way to complete some sets. So I know MCP Phase 1 is being rolled out right now for a lot of users. So if you guys want to look at completing some sets at a cheaper price, stamps tend to drop for $6 on the app. I'm not sure if they're going to be the same price as USPS, but regardless, I'd assume they're going to be on the more affordable side. So next up, let's talk a little bit more about the customer psychology side of things again. I did mention that this is something I noticed throughout the interview. So David talks about how technology is becoming unavoidable. And as a result of this, there's many parents who are adopting it in order to spend time with their kids. So David says that VEVE would be an example of a way for a parent to connect with their child, right? And this is something that I've actually seen multiple times in the community. I've seen parents talk about how they collect with their kids. I mean, My Collectibles, shout out to you. He put out a tweet this past week talking about how his 15-year-old son buys NFTs with him. Now, speaking of targeting Web3 users versus non-Web3 users, David talks about how they're looking to mass market the platform to people who didn't even know that they like to collect, right? So he used stamps as an example. He said that, you target some people who didn't even know that they like to collect stamps, but they have people in their family who used to collect stamps or still currently do. My grandparents on both sides of my family actually have binders filled with stamps that they used to collect. And speaking of the first part of that point, I am somebody who did not know that I like to collect stamps, but as I mentioned earlier, it's one of my favorite things to collect on VEVE. So when I see comments about how people think that VEVE should target the Web3 audience, I can understand that to an extent, but I do think it's a shorter term vision. I think long term, when this stuff starts to become more mainstream, understanding how early we still are. The backlash from the Sesame Street announcement, a good example of that, but also when things like AR glasses start to be implemented and we start to see more social posts of things being augmented into reality and this stuff starts to spread faster and faster and more, I think targeting the mass markets is the right move. And I do talk about this later on in the episode as well, because there's a point that David talks about how they always mint the most popular collectible in the set with the most additions. So stay tuned for that. Now, David talks about utility a little bit again in this interview. He talks about how they're introducing sports and music this year as new business verticals, which is something we already know about. But another point I made sure to include here is something that Alex actually discussed in a recent Twitter space that happened yesterday. So he mentioned that the team and some other licensors are considering VEVEverse gates to create exclusive areas for specific holders. The Golden Moments series was the one being talked about. So the example I saw somebody use was that if you hold a golden moment, you'll be able to gain access to this exclusive space. But from my understanding, this is still all up in the air and they are still trying to decide how this is all going to work. So this was a question that I actually really like. So Ben talks about how, there's a lot of companies that have released sports collectibles or NFTs that had shorter term success, but longer term, they haven't really lasted. So he goes on to ask David, with you guys going to be introducing sports as a new vertical, how is VEVE going to do it differently? So David goes on to say that, a lot of these companies create awesome products, but what they do is they make the most popular character the hardest to get. So what ends up happening is that their market narrows down to the whales and the flippers, who are the only ones who can really afford the higher prices, and the collectors get pushed out. David says that VEVE is always going to mint the most editions for the most popular character in the set. The reason why they're doing this is because they want to make it easier to get. People are hopping on VEVE because they want to buy their most popular character. But if they're making the most popular character the hardest to get, well, then the people who can't afford the prices of those characters in the secondary market are just going to end up hopping off the app. So all in all, it'd be harder to retain their users. Now, I can think of a couple sets on the app right away where I wanted the common the most in the set. Woody from Pixar Pals, Wonder Woman from the Artist Alley set. But just going back to customer psychology and understanding how people think, this is another example of that. I like that he brought it up, and I also like that this is their approach. Now, he did also say that the team is in discussion with artists and brands about collaborations, but he did also say that they're actively thinking of new ways that they can work together. So I'm not going to talk too much here because I really want the video clip to kind of speak for itself. But Ben says that large companies are creating their own metaverses. What are the chances that those companies invest in a metaverse company? And if this happens, what happens if they showed that the company they invested in was VEVE? Here's David's reaction. Just look at his body language.
If it was.
Everyone's watching your face for a reaction now.
No. Yeah. Last year, the buzzword was.
David did also give us his take about his vision of how AI could be used to interact with our collectibles in the future. Now, this is nothing set in stone, but of course, AI is evolving all the time right now. So we talked about how he envisions having deep conversations with AI about certain topics and things you love, and how lots of people would want to enter the VEVEverse simply to interact with their favorite characters and superheroes. So I got Robocop on the right-hand side there. Maybe you got him standing by your front door, and every time you walk into your VEVE home, he says, "Welcome home." And last but not least, David mentions a AAA brand is going to be dropping on the VEVE app very soon. I'm not sure if this is the Japanese IP he was referring to on Matt Gondek's podcast, but regardless, I have Astro Boy on screen just because he did have an Astro Boy collectible standing behind him. I'm not saying that that's what this AAA brand is going to be. I just kind of needed to fill the space here, but David did say it's a brand that he's currently selling in his stores. He said it's going to be coming out at the same time that the physical version drops on shelves. And then when asked if he can give a little hint, I noticed he went from "it's not behind me" to "maybe it's not." So, make of that what you will. Now, I am going to have David's Vagabond Toys website linked in the description down below. So with that being said, let's hop over to the website and let's check out some of the brands that he's currently selling. Okay, so we're over on his website right now. What I think I'm going to do is, instead of going from page to page here, I'm just going to do it based off this little categories tab on the left hand side. So he's got Warhammer, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, card games. He's got Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering. I know that's another big IP. I don't think it's going to be Pokemon. I do think it could potentially be one of these two. It could also be Warhammer. That's a big brand as well. Got NBA basketball cards. Obviously, that's not Japanese IP. Got Blade Runner, Power Rangers, Star Trek, The Witcher, Call of Cthulhu. More Yu-Gi-Oh! Kirby, Demon Slayer, Dragon Ball, One Piece, Transformers. He's got some big brands here, but Kirby, eh? That's Nintendo. Andy Warhol, Banksy, Cause, Kid Robot, Ron English, Tokidoki. Got Taro, which is one of the Decon artists. Airbricks. More Warhammer. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Like I said, the website is going to be linked in the description, so take a look for yourself. Yu-Gi-Oh! There you go. But yeah, it seems like it's right around the corner, so we should be finding out, relatively soon. But either way, let me know down below. So we've now discussed all 10 points. Let's highlight some of the things in David's background. So moving from left to right, first thing I noticed was going to be the Statue of Liberty on the left-hand side there. I think, and I might be wrong here, I probably am wrong, but the face to me looks like a Ron English piece. If anyone knows what that piece is, let me know down below. But to the right of it, as I mentioned before, we got Astro Boy. This is a big brand. I noticed that the hat that he was wearing had the Omi token logo. It is a Binance interview, so it could have just been that, but I don't know if that means anything. I need your guys' help identifying what this is. The logo in the bottom left to me looks like Street Fighter, but when I zoom in, it's too blurry. I can't tell, but to me, it looks like Street Fighter. Let me know what you guys think it is. And then to the right of that, I did notice there is a little Mickey figurine on top of this as well. I think we've seen it in the past, which is why I'm not really touching on it too much. The Wolverine and the Superman poster in the back too has been in his background for quite a while. which is why I don't think it's really anything to highlight. But I think that might be another Disney comic, Mickey Mouse related. So we might be having another Disney comic dropping on the platform soon. But yeah. With regards to David's hat, this was the biggest question I was left with after watching the interview. It was a Binance interview, Binance being the largest exchange in the world, one of, and there was no crypto talk. So at this point, I'm almost thinking this is intentional. You have a crypto exchange interviewing a platform with a crypto token, but does not talk at all about the crypto token. It just, to me, that's a little odd, so I thought I'd just point that out. Ladies and gents, that's going to conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are after watching the interview, and let me know what you guys think that big brand is going to be. If you enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what you want to see in a future episode. And as for our next, I'll catch you then.